Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining us on Joyasonyelive this beautiful evening. It's always wonderful to know you're there to watch us as we engage and discuss very political issues happening in Nigeria. Today we'll be discussing the EU report and the future of polls in Nigeria. Recently, the leader of the European Union Election Observation Mission in Nigeria issued the final report on the just concluded 2023 general polls. The report noted the zeal which Nigerians approached the elections during the preparatory stage, as well as the economic, security and political atmosphere that prevailed, which impacted voter behavior. The EU also identified 6 priority areas requiring immediate attention to clean up Nigeria's elections moving forward. That is some of the areas we'll be addressing on the program today. We'll also talk about the NNPP, as my guest today is the National Publicity Secretary of the New Nigeria People's Party, Dr. Agbomejo. He's a regular here on the show, and it's wonderful to have him this evening. Thank you so much for being part of the program.
Thanks, Joy, for having me. Good evening, viewers.
Yes, it's always very interesting with you. So I would like once again, to tell the viewers where the NNPP stands, especially in this report, and how you found the report. Did you find it infringing on the sovereignty of Nigerians, as some have said? Don't answer just yet. We'll go for a short break and return to delve into the meat of the matter. We'll be right back. A lot of Nigerians continue to react to the report that I mentioned earlier in my introduction. That's the European Union Observation Mission's report. Well, Dr. Agbomejo would be telling us how he felt when that report was released, and after reading that report, did it also align with his thoughts of the elections? Doctor, what was your thought?
Oh, fine. You see, when the news that the EU had released its report broke out, of course, we were still in the Salah festive mood.
Of course.
But as a party leader, I said, okay, let me take some 2-3 hours out of the festive mood to look at it, so that, because I know that in no time at all, people like you will be calling on me to begin to comment on what is contained therein, And so I took my time to look at it. And 2 things crossed my mind. The first is that with the understanding that no country is an island,
Of course.
Because it has become a general principle that for every election in any country, people are taken in and then accredited as observers from other countries. We're not even talking of organizations now, individual observer groups. Then you begin to look at broad organizations like the EU, the AU, the ECOWAS, and so on and so forth. So it has now become a universal practice that they go across to any country that is having an election to see what's going on there, And so that report, I've read it, and the 2 things that crossed my mind, the first is that, yes, it's not Uhuru yet. We haven't gotten to where Nigerians had thought we were going to get to. But then you need to also understand that the mood that Nigerians were in preparatory to the election was as if everything was going to be perfect, But those of us who are active on the field knew that it wasn't going to be, because the perfection we're looking for is not what is going to come overnight, So our expectations were nothing different from what the EU said. But like we always say, you can't get it done, completely overnight.
So not to cut you short, I would like you to go back to what you just said here. You said prior to the elections, you did see these flaws that eventually played out during the elections?
Oh yes, as a party leader, I can tell you that I knew where the booby traps were, because we had already identified where the challenges were. Women participation, youth participation, and most dangerously, the negative use of the social media, preparatory to the election. That conditioned the minds of Nigerians as if the election had been decided.
Exactly.
So these are some of the things that we were able to, point our fingers on as what would constitute the likely challenges after the election, But now continuing in the vein that where I was going to, I want to say that, yes, no country is an island, but I also felt worried that the report is hard in the sense that they seem to be telling us what they think we should do. They have forgotten that they are more advanced democratically than we are.
Okay.
Yeah. And they have also forgotten that it took them a long time to evolve to get to where they are today. And one would have thought that, it's just like when you are bringing up a baby, you have to keep talking to the baby, keep trying to get the baby to understand that there are certain things that he or she needs to be doing to be able to attain that level of perfection that you have attained as the parent that is bringing him up. But that's not what we're seeing. There's nothing wrong in being hard, but when you begin to say things that somehow would also now begin to add to the injury, the anger of Nigerians. Yeah, it becomes worrisome. It now begins to make us feel as if they are not interested in our stability. Okay, elections will always come with its flaws. What is important is how do you learn from it, preparatory to the next one. And so there's nothing wrong with what they are saying, but my feelings and the feelings of my party is that they've come out too hard, instead of, telling us, okay, these are the things we think you should do and so on and so forth, identifying the challenges and then directing their energies.
It's a matter of semantics now. It came on too hard. Not that those things that were mentioned is a tall order for Nigerians. Ambiguity of the law, better participation of women in all of this, the accessibility to election result in premium time, and most of those things that were mentioned. Is it a tall order for Nigeria?
No, these are obvious challenges that you and I know that our electoral process is confronted with. But what I'm saying is, okay, for instance, preparatory to the election, what did they do? Normally, before every election, we have a lot of these organizations that are working closely with parties, political parties. And what they normally do is they try to identify areas that they feel could constitute difficulties in the election. And then they go ahead to begin to develop target audience, that they would go to train, they would go to talk to and all of that. And then above all, they also come out most times to assist not just the electoral body, but the political parties, in areas that they may have identified as places that they would need to improve on and all of that.
Wouldn't that be too much meddling?
I don't
think so. When you say
so.
you help political parties, you have, because we've also been here, in spite of how objective that report seemingly is, without mentioning names of who went against the electoral laws. Don't you think that if they went even further, Nigerians would have said this is meddling? You gave the NNPP this much support, and you're giving this other political party not as much support.
I think you're not getting what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we've had a long-standing relationship with these organizations. The EU has been very deeply involved in our electoral process.
I agree with you.
They are involved in trainings. They are involved
in seminars.
They are involved in so many things.
Even for the umpires as well.
And then the electoral umpire, the INEC and all of that. So what I was trying to say, which it appears as if you didn't get well, is what did they do? If you know that these were going to be the likely challenges, you don't wait until you are confronted with it, then you begin to say, these are the things that you should have done.
But isn't that the challenges they had seen before time and then addressed it with the many trainings and summits that you said you just alluded that they organized?
I do know that the energies have been concentrated largely on how to get women involved.
Right.
And if you look at the statistics of the voters that came out in this election, a good percentage of them are women. A good percentage of them are women. If you listened to what the INEC chairman said, he was at least able to give himself some, some kudos for having done well. I heard him say that he has done so well by producing and creating an enabling environment for as many as 8 political parties to win election. And I was asking myself, it never occurred to him that in the past, when it was either one party or 2 parties winning, the other parties were necessarily suppressed and denied the chances of winning. You understand what I'm talking about?
Yes, I understand.
Yeah, if the field were level enough all this while, the parties would have been winning all this while for every general election. So what I'm trying to say is that the job of these organizations, the UNDP, for instance, they came from about 2015 through 2019, until recently, they had what is called the DGD. They had DGD 1, DGD 2. These are specialized training programs designed to help political parties to evolve and mature and deliver on its assignment, as political parties. It led to the creation of what we now call the Political Parties Training Institute, which is domiciled in NIPS, in Kuru, in Jos. These are tangible things, tangible contributions that have been made. But the DGD folded up, that is the UNDP arm that came in to work directly with political parties, and then the election monitoring body folded up about 4 years or 5 years ago, and then gave way for EU to step in. So all along on our way to 2023 general election, the bigger chunk of the job was done by the European Union. And so what I'm trying to say is the assignment is simple. Identify the areas where you feel the political parties have some difficulties. Identify the areas where you feel the electoral umpire has some difficulties, and concentrate your activities in those areas. So the right thing for them to have done is, okay, the youths, how do we get them to participate? The women, how do we get them to participate? And then all the other areas that they have pointed out. If they had concentrated their energies in those directions, I'm sure that the
mixed reactions we are having now
would have been reduced. It would have been kept at a very minimal level. So what I'm trying to say is it's unfortunate that they had to wait until we got to this level before they are now beginning to tell us, okay, these were the things. And so somehow
would you say that this report should have come after the tribunals, the many tribunals across the country? Because believe it or not, this is one of the most contested, in court now.
Yeah. I thought that I were even going to deal with that issue, because I was also going to say that it's not correct, to have released such a damning report when they know that the matters that resulted from the election are still alive in court.
Right.
Yeah. So I thought that we were going to handle that separately in the course of the program. But since you brought it,
yes, I would like us to address it now. Yes.
We are talking of issues that border on the sovereignty of a nation now, the stability of our democracy. The wounds are still there. People are still feeling cheated that what they got eventually from the 2023 general election does not represent what they came out to do or what they came out to say. People are still nursing those wounds, And so coming out now at this point when people are still trying to get these wounds to heal through the judicial process, to release such a damning report, it smacks foul. It makes me feel that there's something that is not adding up somewhere. I thought that would have waited, until maybe when the matters are dispensed with. You can now come and say, okay, even though the matters have been dispensed with, these were the challenges you faced in the course of the election. And going forward, as we prepare for the next election, we think that we should concentrate more energy in this direction, and all of that. Because I know that if the African Union or the ECOWAS goes to America or goes to Britain or goes to Switzerland, while their matters are still alive in court to say, okay, these are the things we saw in the election. It shows that your election is flawed with irregularities, is flawed with a lot of challenges and all of that. They also would not take it lightly because the likelihood of it upsetting the system is there, and that's exactly what we are seeing now. Because at the time we thought we were now beginning to cool the tension down so that the country can move forward. Because like I always say, the tension is created only during campaigns. But after every election, once the elections are won, The position of our law is that if you feel aggrieved, you move to court. And so somebody has to be there. Nature abhors vacuum. So we already have a precedent, whether he's there rightly or wrongly. The issue is, the matter is in court. And so one would have expected the European Union to tarry a little, before releasing such a damning report.
Okay, so it goes without saying that if you were also the advisor to the president, you would also release that statement that the presidency released, where it flayed and faulted the report, talking about, first of all, the inadequate coverage of the observers in the first place. We had about 176,000 polling units, and with your 50 observers, there's no way you would have covered enough to have a comprehensive report of the such. And there were several things that the presidency, in retorting to that, also mentioned. I haven't read what the presidency released as in reaction to what the EU did, but as a party leader who was also on the field, I can tell you that what they have there as the report cannot be seen to have exhaustively dealt with what happened across the 176,000 polling units in the country, because I'm sure they were not in any of the polling units close to Sambisa Forest. Of course.
I'm also sure that they were not in any of the polling units close to the place in Imo State that is permanently restive. I am also not sure if they were in all the polling units in Zamfara, where people are getting killed every day and so on and so forth. So if you have a country that has 36 states and its state capital, and then you have covered, I don't know from the report how many states they have covered, but I'm sure that before you can say, with confidence that these were your findings, it has to be seen clearly, and we have to be convinced as Nigerians that you really have gone wrong. That's one angle to it. The second angle, and the most dangerous of it all, is that in the past, such reports are, at the interim, discussed with party leaders.
Right.
Political parties, who are the primary actors, the major actors on the field.
Wouldn't that affect the quality of the report?
No. It's not as if it's going to change the report. It's not going to change. Discussing with the parties wouldn't have changed the content of the report.
What would be the reason to discuss
the parties, if it had been brought before the political parties, the parties could come out to say, okay, we agree that this report is neither good nor bad or whatever, but that let us not release it to the public now. I think the major thing is that the timing of this release, because like I keep saying, you can't go and do this in their country and you think you leave that place with your head complete. That's what I think. When matters are still being dealt with at the tribunals, you don't go and release this kind of report, except you have an agenda to destabilize the
and democracy. Which is what the federal government replied.
I don't know how hard. I don't know how hard their statement is, but I will want to stay mild, and I will want to insist that the timing of the release of that
let me just read a sentence from the federal government's reply of that report. It says it recalls that the EU group had manifested signs of bias earlier in the run-up to the elections, adding that the report was merely collated to justify its already manifested bias against the system. Is it possible that the EU observation mission has bias towards these elections? Or maybe
it's, once you have a federal government in place, the government is formed by the All Progressives Congress. So whatever you are seeing there could be what the APC as a party has observed. My party didn't observe that. All I can tell you is that the EU has been in the country operating, and my party cannot come out to tell you they noticed or anybody noticed before the election that they already had a predetermined mind as to what they would tell Nigerians after the election. I think my party will not take that stand. And like I said, this could be the position of APC that has this present government in place. It is not in any way the position of NMPP.
Okay.
That's what I can tell
you. So moving forward, what do we do about those coming into the country to observe elections? Because I remember again to the build-up of the elections where we were asking all and sundry to come to our country and see how we were going to deliver credible, fair, free elections. And that's on that basis that we had the throng of foreigners into the country. So is there going to be, or would you suggest to the power, that the Bola Tinubu's administration, to have a better hold on those who come, and when their reports are done, so we do not see this kind of, like you mentioned?
No, this goes beyond the government in place. The government in place is a product of a political party, and so any attempt to try to stifle who comes and who does not come would be seen as not in the interest of the universal principles of other countries using their organizations to step into countries where elections are held, to be able to look at what is being done there and all of that. Democracy is a universal thing. The only thing is that it's domesticated based on, you know, the culture and peculiarities of the country that is practicing it. And so these are some of the things we expect our foreign brothers to understand, that what works with them there probably wouldn't work here, because our culture differs. So I won't subscribe to the idea of getting this government to attempt to, you know, have a grip as to who comes and who does not come. The only thing that we can do going forward is, because as a matter of fact, Joy, I haven't had, after any election in Britain or any election in Switzerland or in United States, I haven't had the African Union or ECOWAS come out to say this election is flawed. I don't know if you have had.
Is it because it is indeed not flawed, or that we just go there for the tea and sightseeing? Do you actually have reports when we return to share with African leaders or Nigerian leaders?
Well, I will try to cross-check, but I also cannot categorically tell you whether the African Union or the ECOWAS, for instance, goes to US to observe election. I do know that some organizations sends their operatives to go and observe, but I haven't had if AU as a body has sent people there before.
And published a report.
And published a report. So that's where we are going to. Even if they have gone, you know, what I'm saying is, have we read or have they come out to address the press?
That's in spite of the flaws that often happen in their elections. Did we see it happen
in US, the last election? Trump cried foul that a lot of things went wrong. You know, we saw live on the TVs how certain things were done. Yet we didn't hear any organization, especially any African organization, come out to say, we are convinced that what you did is bad, and so you would have done this, you shouldn't have done this, and all of that, and all of that.
I mean, Dr. Agbo, it often seems like we don't know where to draw the line. We run to them for advice.
It's this problem of overdependence on them. We are still struggling to get out of this neo-colonialist mentality. You know, and that's why they don't need us when they do their things. But when it is our turn to do our own, we'll bring them. And when they come, they don't just come to do what we're asking them to come and do in line with what our culture and tradition says. They come, do what they want to do, and then try to tell us that despite your culture, despite your level of understanding, this, that. And what I'm saying, Joy, is that we haven't gone to their countries to do this. So until we're able to do away with these neo-colonialist tendencies, which seems to have enveloped our brains completely, we will continue to suffer all of this. Have you noticed that since this report was released, the agitation has become stronger? People are now complaining more. Despite the fact that the tension had gone down, people decided to resign to fate to wait for the tribunal to take its position on the issues. But since this report was released, the newspapers are washed with complaints, the TVs are
the report was even admitted as evidence.
Exactly.
Now. That's how important we find such reports.
Well, the way it was presented, Nigerians are monitoring what is being done at the tribunal. So,
of course.
They only took advantage, the PDP only took advantage of what is contained therein to push it. You can imagine what would have happened if the tribunal had said we are not taking this as evidence or as any form of whatever to work with at the tribunal. Nigerians will say, okay, we can now see. So that's why they have taken it in. Let's see what they do with it.
Okay, it's time to go for a short break right now. When we return, we'll just ask a doctor to just give us his side of this EU report, and if his party had won, how they would have better handled this. And we still have the NNPP story to discuss. It is becoming a big party with big boys problems. We will get into that after this break. Stay with us. Welcome back from that short break. We're still discussing the EU report and future polls in Nigeria with Dr. Agbo Major. I call him Dr. Major. The National Publicity Secretary of the NNPP, that's the New Nigeria People's Party. If the NNPP, hypothetically speaking, had emerged at the head, maybe Senator Kwankwaso was president, and this report came the way it came in spite of all the contest in court, what would your reply have been? Bearing in mind that a lot of Nigerians found the reply from the federal government a little too emotional. Maybe they should have admitted that there were flaws in the elections and probably agree to those recommendations that were given.
I think I've had and read this APC-led government admit repeatedly that they are not coming to say that this election was completely clean. I've heard them say that before. I don't know if that is the position of the party, but I've had very senior government operatives, even the president himself, I think in one of his outings, he did mention something like that he admits that certain things were not done the way they should have been done, but that what is important is the stability
moving
of our
forward,
nation.
right.
So having come out to say that, I think Nigerians should understand that whether anybody likes it or not, there is no system anywhere that is perfect, you know. And so, like we always say, what creates problems for us as a country is campaigns. After campaigns, somebody has to be there, whether the person won neatly or did not win neatly. Now, if this was an NNPP-led government, our reaction to what the EU just said in their report, like I said, I haven't read completely
the reaction from the federal
government. I haven't read it, but at least I have an idea of what they said or what they are still saying, which is to the effect that the timing is wrong, which is also to the effect that they shouldn't come to tell us hoodwink and sinker what we should do as a country in terms of how we manage our electoral process and all of that. If it was an NNPP government, we may not be too harsh like that, but we will condemn in totality the timing of the release of this report. And I will continue to insist on that. Because it is prejudice. You know that there are the matters from the presidency through National Assembly up to the governors and the State Assembly, people who won, the matters are still alive in court.
Exactly.
And like I told you, I haven't seen this happen before. At least I've been part of up to 4 or 5 electoral cycles, you know, as a leader in NNPP. I haven't seen this happen before. What normally happens is that, yes, the reports are compiled, and then the body waits for the courts to finish. That's number one. Then number two, the body that has compiled the report also discusses it with the political parties.
But
and
then
like
again, have you
said,
seen elections in Nigeria so highly disputed?
What I've seen
Elections before now in Nigeria so highly disputed. I mean, having about so many political parties challenging it in court.
But that is the beauty of democracy.
It is the beauty.
It is the beauty of democracy. This is what we have always prayed for. The democracy is all about the power to disagree to agree.
Right.
Yeah, because the process of challenging elections itself straightens those things that were not properly done in the election proper.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we are seeing today is a good thing for our democracy. In the past, people would just, after election, go and sit down. Nobody goes to ask questions. But what we are seeing today, of course, I was disappointed at the commencement of the process when I saw some political parties withdrawing their matters. There was no need for that.
They shouldn't have.
Yes, they shouldn't have. But the only thing I noticed was that they were all challenging the same thing, which is that results were not
transmitted. In premium time.
And that was one of the reasons the NNPP gave for not going to court. We felt that, okay, since other parties had gone to court to challenge the same thing, it's of no use for all the parties to be challenging the same thing.
So why would you be disappointed in other political parties for withdrawing when the NNPP, your political party, also withdrew from the race?
No, we didn't even start.
Right,
so
okay,
the issue of whether we withdraw or not is not there. We never started at all. We didn't go to court.
But I think I read somewhere where your former national chairman also raised the concerns.
Professor Alkali?
Professor Alkali,
okay.
yes.
He said
He also raised concerns, and just immediately after the elections had promised to go to court to seek redress for the way it was handled, and even mentioned at the time that your political party's logo was not visible, and that is why we saw the low numbers.
Yes, we had some issues, and we brought together a consortium of lawyers to look in depth into what we were possibly going to ask the tribunal to determine.
Right. And
part of it was that the logo itself, as manifested on the ballot paper, wasn't clean enough for the voters, especially those who were only sympathizing with us and were going to vote for us, but are card-carrying members of other political parties. Of course, it wasn't easy for card-carrying members of our party to also identify the logo, but it was relatively easier for them to be able to say, okay, this looks like, this has some semblance of our logo. But those who are sympathetic to the party and wanted to vote for our candidates across all levels were completely unable to identify the logo. But when we brought the lawyers together to advise the party on what we should be asking the tribunal to do, we discovered that it appeared as if INEC had more than one contractor. They had so many contractors, you know,
that handled the printing.
Yes, and so we discovered that the problem of the, non-visibility of the logo was not a national thing. It was only in a few places.
Which was not significant enough to change the tide for NNPP?
We considered other factors, which I'm coming to.
Right.
So we now felt, okay, if that's the case, why don't we just look at other things that we should be asking the tribunal to help us determine? The issue of logo, we were able to say, okay, let's just look beyond that. We now looked at other things, irregularities here and there, what do I call it, violence, inaccessibility of polling units, especially to people who are challenged physically and all of that. These are things that the lawyers were looking at. But at the end of it all, we discovered that we needed to allow our democracy to be stable, And
was there a disagreement in the NNPP as to whether to go to the tribunal or not?
No, there wasn't. There was never
because I'm asking because shortly after that statement by Professor Rufai Alkali, he seemed to resign, and some of us who did not get a clear picture were asking ourselves.
But I've come on air repeatedly to explain why he left.
Right.
I came on air repeatedly to explain why he left. It has nothing to do with any form of disagreement at all. And he even gave a reason. He said that the NNPP is a party driven by youths, and that he needed to create an opportunity for the youths to be able to take up.
That's very noble of him, because that seems to be the only political party that's doing that.
He has found a place in the positive side of the history book of our party, because that is the real spirit that drives the party, the spirit of the youths.
Well, speaking about the NNPP, you seem to be having issues with some states in the South where your state chairmen were dismissed, or is it expelled? I'm not sure what proper English to call there. But for a party that's trying to get to become the big boys, is it not too early to start expelling principal members of the party?
Joy, you don't become a big boy if you are not able to enforce discipline.
I don't know. I'm not a big boy.
You need to be a disciplined person to be able to metamorphose into a big boy.
Right.
And you know, for the avoidance of doubt, let me tell you, we're not struggling to be a big boy anymore. We're already big boys, you know, because if you check through our records, you know, that emanated from the just concluded election, you will know that we are now strong as a political party. The truth is that I was the one that addressed the world, you know, the day the NWC took a decision to remove those two chairmen, Ogun and Delta. You know, there were clear evidences of anti-party activities. These were people that openly worked against the party.
Openly working against the party. I mean, there are dynamics to how these elections went. So it's relatable what anti-party activities now means in Nigeria. So,
well, let me reduce this discussion to what happened in my party.
Right.
And like I said, the bigger parties, the ones that have formed government in the past, maybe the things they see as indiscipline may not be the things we see as indiscipline. The things they see as infringements on the provisions of their constitution, because they are already big, may not, the way they address it may not be the way we would want to address it. For us, that is an evolving party. What they would take for granted, we will never take it. And so we needed to have some scapegoats so that others would know that it is not business as usual. We have video clips of what those two chairmen did.
Which was?
You just mentioned them, Ogun and Delta.
I mean, what are those things that you consider so much anti-party that you could not just have maybe suspended for a couple of days or weeks, but expelled from the...
I don't know if reporters from your media house were there. I'm sure they were there because they always cover our activities and they have full details of the reasons I gave that day. But I think the major thing, the broad reason is that they did things that were not in the interest of the provisions of our constitution.
Right.
They openly adopted candidates of other political parties.
Which is where I'm going.
I do not know.
Right. However, one would say, listening to you right now, that how would you have a good grasp of your political party? We've seen this happen. We've seen people who are sympathetic to Kwankwaso, for instance, who necessarily aren't NNPP, but they know what Kwankwaso stands for, and it fits into what they also stand for. Across board, really, that happened before the elections, and during the elections, without mentioning names, we saw some people.
No. I think that's a different scenario altogether.
Right.
We're talking of Joy. Look at this scenario. Let me just comprehensively put it on the table for you to understand.
Okay, maybe I'm just trying
the number one person of a political party in a state is the state chairman.
Right.
So the millions who are members of the party in that state all look up to him. So whatever he says is like a decree. Whatever he says is like a direction.
Right.
Which the followers are bound to follow. Now, what happened? The scenario you are painting now, people who are sympathetic to His Excellency Rabi Musa Kwankwaso as a person because of his antecedents, they probably may not be leaders of their political parties occupying such very exalted and very sensitive positions.
That can be argued, but let's...
Have you seen did you see any state chairman of APC or PDP or Labour Party openly come out to endorse His Excellency Rabi Musa Kwankwaso during the campampaigns?
Or maybe...
Did you see any?
I'm not talking about Kwankwaso here particularly.
Or coming out to endorse the MNPP as a party during the campaigns. I'm sure he didn't see any. No, so there is no way we would have allowed that to happen in our party. So the punishment that is meted out to those two gentlemen is in line with the provisions of our constitution and is meant to serve as deterrent for others, and a reprimand for their attitudes which were never in line with the provisions of our constitution.
Okay, now let's still move because we don't have much time any longer. We're still talking NNPP right now, or
Yeah,
rather,
to talk NNPP.
we've taken the conversation to NNPP.
Please, NNPP.
Of course, where Governor Abba Kabir Yusuf, the only governor the NNPP was able to garner. I'm trying to say this without sounding insulting. I hope you don't find it so.
No problem. That's the reality of ground.
Of course. Now, he was on a lot of backlash from people with the policies he enacted shortly after assuming office, where he was seen as maybe witch hunting, and it did not seem to prioritize what the people of Kano State wanted him to do: industrialization, improve security, economic development, and all the many beautiful things that was promised during campaigns. Rather, we saw the demolition of homes, we saw the non-payment of over 10,800 staff, and all of that. What's your take on that?
Are you saying that Kano is stagnant at the moment? Is that what you're trying to say? And that the only thing that is happening there is demolition?
That's what we have been hearing.
That's what you are hearing as a journalist.
From Kano State, it seems
as
like
a journalist. Do
we
you have your
don't
men on ground there?
Of course, we do
From
have
Kaftan
our men.
TV, what are they telling you?
We do have our men everywhere in the country. But does it concern you when all the news that comes from Kano State is that of demolition and refusal to
Have you bothered to check who are pushing the news that is negative about His Excellency Engineer Abba Yusuf Kabir?
Is it because are you implying that it is not true?
It can never be.
Right.
Let me tell you.
Good. Joy, I'm happy I have you
what
here.
What is happening in Kano is exactly as agreed during the campaigns. Like this issue of demolition you're talking about. All those buildings that have been brought down were done as agreed by NNPP and Kano electorates.
Really?
Go and check through. That's why I'm telling you that those pushing that negative narrative, they are doing a job, a hatchet man's job. And so we expect you as journalists to have a bigger and more broad-minded approach to dealing with what they're telling you from Kano.
And you don't find it very interesting that seems to be the very first thing you do 2 days after coming into, after you're swearing into office?
Those things were obstacles. For instance, the roundabout that faces the government house that was pulled down was a heaven for criminals. It was a heaven for criminals.
But that wasn't even the response
which had the capacity to compromise the security of not just the governor.
Why does it feel like you're being a publicity secretary right now to refine the words? Because that was not what we read from the government statement.
What did you read?
And that it had insignia that did not agree with the governor.
I've dealt with this with Ahmed.
Here on Kaftan. Well, you've not dealt with Joyasonye live followers.
I got Ahmed to read out if he had any. The details. Ahmed said that the SSG issued a statement where it was alleged that the roundabout had a cross on it, the sign of the cross on it.
Exactly.
And I said, please read it. And he read something from his phone or from a laptop or something. And I said, but at the end of the day, when we continued the discussion, he said, no, that the SSG only said it. And I said, if that is what the SSG said, he only said it. If you have evidence that he wrote this and signed and said, okay, we demolish this roundabout because of this, that, let me see it. See, Kano is very sensitive religiously. The APC is still finding it very difficult to grapple with the reality that they've gone out of Kano politics forever. So they are still employing forever. They are still employing all sorts of negative narratives, blackmail, pull him down attitudes and all of that, targeted at the governor and his noble policies for the good people of Kano. But like I said, if you take a drive to Kano, or you ask your operatives on the ground in Kano to talk to you, they will tell you that Kano people are completely in tune with what is being done. That roundabout, for instance, was not demolished because it had a sign of cross on it. As a matter of fact, there was no sign of cross on it. if you look at what was put there, I argued it here. I said the contractor that did that job is a Muslim. The then governor, Ganduje, is a Muslim. So how did the cross find its way there? There's nothing like that. Ordinary thinking would tell you and make you understand that there was never an arrangement to put any cross there, and so there was no cross there. They're just trying to whip up religious sentiments and make the government unstable. But Kano people are so sophisticated that they have refused to give in to the pressure of doing anything that is in line with what they expect, which is to destabilize the government. That roundabout was pulled down basically for constituting some form of security nuisance facing the government house.
Right. And then quickly, the 10,800 staff that the governor also refused to pay their salaries or wages. What would be your response to that?
When were they employed?
It doesn't matter. Was their employment reviewed before it was completely stopped?
Why did Ganduje not employ them during his 7.5 years in office?
But
why did he wait until 1-2 months to the end of his tenure, knowing fully well that there are economic difficulties everywhere? Joy, but you and I know that this is what outgoing governors do. If they don't like the faces of their incoming governors, of those who are succeeding them, what they do is to set booby traps. Where is the resources for a government that is just coming in? For an economy that has been so badly bastardized, an economy that has suffered a lot of, I don't even know how to put it on air, but I can tell you that the Kano economy that should be a very buoyant economy is an economy that was subjected to all sorts of, I don't know how to describe it. So an economy that has been brought to its knees, then at the twilight of your exit, the time you are exiting, you will now go get 10,000 something workers, and you want a governor who is determined to come and improve on infrastructures, a governor who is determined to come and improve on education, a governor who is determined to come and improve on healthcare facilities.
But a lot of people are asking, irrespective of how they emerged into the government as staff, was it reviewed? Could there have been better ways instead of sending them back into society without doing anything? I mean, we're talking as much as 10,800. Wouldn't this government have looked inward?
Were they ab initio qualified to be employed into those positions?
Okay, Dr. Major.
Were they qualified to be brought in to occupy those positions that they were brought in to occupy?
All 10,800 of them
built around it. Yeah, look, let me tell you, if you and I are brought in at the same time into an organization and there is need to review that stanza of employment, it will first affect the two of us.
You're probably right.
Yeah, then they will now go back and say, okay, let us now look at how to review this.
Okay, so in a minute...
Is Joy qualified to return? Is Dr. Agbo qualified to return? Yeah, that's the way.
In a minute, I would like you to tell us...
What's the direction we're going to?
Just speaking about direction, that was the word you just took out of my mouth. Where is NNPP directed towards right now to ensure that maybe 2027 is better, you win more states, and probably even the presidency?
We're targeting the presidency.
Of course.
Here
we go again.
Our ultimate target...
Here we go again.
Our ultimate target is to provide leadership that is missing for the country. So the issue of whether we're looking for more governors, more states or whatever, that's not... yes, they will come naturally, but our ultimate target is the presidency.
Are you positioning? Are you positioning? Have you appraised the past elections and are positioning to ensure that it works?
We have done an interim appraisal.
Is it a report I can read?
Well, for now, it is still our report. Again, you can now see why you and I agreed that the EU was in a hurry to do what it wasn't supposed to do. We now have a report which for now is for the party's internal consideration.
Right.
It will definitely get to you media people, but this is not the time.
Okay.
Because we'll still have matters like in Kano, we'll have matters in court, in Taraba, where we won.
allegedly.
And our two hands were tied to the back.
Dr. Agbo Major, National.
To tell you what has happened.
Dr. Agbo Major, National Publicity Secretary, New Nigeria People's Party, NNPP. Thank you so much for being part of the program.
It's always a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure to be with you too. But this is where we would round up on Joyasonyelive. But be rest assured, we'll be back tomorrow with so much more. Do have a wonderful evening.